and check on how well things are going. He has to be, I know that can sound less than holy or less than spiritual, but it's an essential. This is a huge organization of parishes. And finally, Brian, I can say this on NBC, I hope I can get away with it. He has to be a person who can handle criticism with calm and with total trust in God. Do what you know is right and push on.
And handling it, part of the assumption there means hearing it, being a citizen of the world. The world has changed so much since even the last time we were at this.
Absolutely.
Social media and the like, ubiquitous media that never sleeps 24/7, and everyone, to one way of thinking, is media now with their own followers. So has to be able to hear it, handle it, kind of process it, and decide what's worthy of his speaking out.
Brian, you're exactly right. This is a new era. All of a sudden, it happened. In the car that brought us over here, you were very kind to send it, we sent and received 5 messages.
Right.
Just getting across Manhattan. And that's the way we're living right now. And I think that we have to adjust to the reality. The times are quite different. Brian, I was living in Rome and teaching at the North American College, the seminary in Rome, when Paul VI was elected. And all of the cardinals were living with us, the American, Canadian cardinals and so forth, English speaking. I listened to that conclave at the table, in the living room and so forth. Then for the conclave of Pope John Paul I and Pope John Paul II, I was a judge of the Rota at that time, kind of the Supreme Court of the Catholic Church. And we 14 old judges were the ones who guarded the cardinals in the conclave. And if you notice, there was a group sitting in front of the door to the Sistine Chapel when they said extra omnes. Well, that is the Rota. And I was there twice and walked out when I was invited to leave. And so for a 4th time, I had the great honor of being part of the electorate for Pope Benedict XVI. So I kind of consider myself an expert in conclaves right now.
Well.
And I know when Cardinal Dolan gets home and he can tell me whatever he can tell me, I'll add a 5th.
You're assuming he's coming home. You're assuming he's not getting a new apartment in Rome.
Well, he could come home and say hello and then return.
I've been told, you mentioned social media. First of all, the fact that we didn't put you in a yellow car with a light on the roof is probably a step forward. I hope it was a good ride across town. You mentioned sending out 5 messages in just your ride across New York City. I've been told that while you and I have been talking, the papal Twitter account has been reactivated to Pontifex, forgive my pronunciation, from sede vacante, which is what its status was. Still nothing posted there, as we all await. I think the status of the papal Twitter account is somewhere lower on the status of importance as learning the next pope. And you're the only one here in the room who knows what it's like to go through this balloting. Secret ballots written on pieces of paper, folded twice, though the results read aloud to the cardinals who are voting members, and then they are burned along with your notes, correct? Nothing lives on from that room?
Nothing is carried out.
Wow, that's incredible.
And that's exactly the way it should be. And I have never breathed a word of what happened inside. I feel that that's a commitment I make, and I dare to say that we Americans kind of believe in that in a very, very special way. If we raise our hand and say this is between you and me and no one else, we mean it. And I know that I would be very, very uncomfortable if I ever breathed a word. So when Cardinal Dolan comes home and I try to draw something out of him so I can tell you, Brian, I know he's not going to cooperate.
No, he's not going to have it. George Weigel, it's been your life's work writing and studying on this topic. And since we'll go easy on His Eminence and not try to get secrets out of them on live television. To what extent is there lobbying? You talk about, George, surges and different kind of waves of popularity, the conclave going one way but then deciding to go another, people entering as favorites and yet not emerging so. How is that done to the best of your knowledge? Are there oral presentations, or is it all kind of mini confabs?
Cardinal Egan just mentioned these general congregations of cardinals that meet between the death of the Pope, or in this case his abdication, and the opening of the conclave. There's a broad discussion of issues facing the church around the world. At that point, different cardinals make different interventions. There's a lot of measuring of man and issues at that, I would imagine. There's also an informal process that I think is very much part of this discernment of who is it that God wants us to choose? Who is it that we think we're doing the best by church and world in choosing? And that takes place in all of the ways that you would imagine, in private conversations, over meals. I suspect there was a lot of conversation last night back in the St. Martha's house, the Vatican guest house where the cardinals were living during the conclave. I expect there was even more conversation there during the lunch break this afternoon. We're working backwards from the result. One would have thought that things were really beginning to move. But I think this works differently in different circumstances. No one expected in the second conclave of 1968 that a non-Italian pope would be elected for the first time in 455 years. Yet two of the members of that conclave, Cardinal Ratzinger, who would later become Benedict XVI, Cardinal William Baum of Washington, neither of them revealing a syllable of what happened inside the conclave, nonetheless said that as a general proposition, the shock of the Pope's death after 33 days of John Paul I created a kind of psychological condition for the possibility of the cardinals doing something different. In 2005, you heard many cardinals speaking before the conclave was enclosed of what they called a consensus of esteem building around Cardinal Ratzinger because of the brilliant way he led those general congregations and because of his masterful homily sermon at the funeral of John Paul II, which of course you, Brian, remember very well because we were here together for that. I'm not sure what the dynamics were in this conclave. No one knows at this point, although we can, I think, have some sense that the hinge nature of this moment in the history of the Catholic Church was well understood, and that these cardinals were looking for a way to turn that corner into a different kind of future, a new future, a future of evangelical fervor, and that had something to do with shaping the rapidity of this decision. Let's get on with the business of preaching the gospel.
All that is exactly why we ask for the advice and counsel of one George Weigel, who's been part of our broadcast team for many years. George, as you've been talking, the 8 o'clock hour has just arrived in Rome. Those familiar with the city know that around 8 p.m. Romans are just getting started. They're just starting to think about, should we go out and grab dinner? It's a late city. It is a city of insane traffic, tiny vehicles beginning with the Vespa on up, crowded streets, boisterous nightlife, but tonight, a lot of the traffic, pedestrian and vehicular, is aimed at getting there, getting where Ann Thompson is. She has a fantastic position in the middle of the square. Ann, I imagine they're starting to pack in around you.
Oh, they are, Brian. I mean, I see people as far as I can see. It is unbelievable, and you hear the cheering and the yelling as they wait for those doors to open. We're watching all kinds of flags fly. Every once in a while, we'll hear somebody singing. But this is a crowd that is very joyful. There is great anticipation here because everybody's wondering, what choice did those Cardinals make? What direction did they choose for the church? And how will this next Pope embody that direction? And it is a wonderful atmosphere. You know, one of the things I'm always struck by, Brian, when I come to Vatican City is that how you were able to have all these thousands of people here in an area like St. Peter's Square, and it's peaceful and nothing bad happens. And there really is this sense of order. There's a sense of respect, and despite all the joy, there's also a sense of decorum because people know that this is a holy place. It is a place of reverence, and what they are about to see is history. Brian?
And Lester Holt, from your vantage point, now we're finding our eyes as closely peeled on that thin veil of curtains and those window panes as we were watching that chimney stack earlier today.
That's where we'll hear the announcement, perhaps in the next few minutes, that it'll be spoken in Latin, but we have a pope. And I looking at this picture and then looking at the reverse shot we've been seeing over the sea of people in St. Peter's Square, you have to wonder what it must be like to part those curtains and walk out and realize they're all here for you and that you are the spiritual leader for over 1 billion people. What an amazing thought that is. Father Robert Barron is here with me, and we've been having a conversation the last couple of days. I said, who wants this job? Do they go into the Sistine Chapel thinking, well, my time has come? And I'll put that question to you now. I mean, the person who's going to walk out here, do they want to be out there?
Well, I think anyone that wants the job of the papacy is probably a little bit insane. As George was saying, just the sheer weight of the responsibility on the Pope. And the way we describe that job, you have to be a great evangelist, you have to be almost a top-level CEO, you have to be a media star. You know, for one person to do any one of those things would be an extraordinary accomplishment. So I really can't imagine someone who's sane really wanting the job. Having said that, it's very much part of Catholic spirituality that we should be open to the will of God. And I think the person who receives this vote and hears his brothers say, yes, you're the one we want, should see in that the will of God. I think he's willing to take it. What's extraordinary is he comes out on that loggia, he'll come out as Il Papa, Viva il Papa, the father of this extraordinary worldwide community. I think, too, of the Bernini colonnade that reaches out, and the symbol there is the church reaching out to gather in the whole world. And they're coming here now. It's a beautiful symbol of the whole world coming to see Il Papa. You also see, of course, the Catholic genius for art, architecture, symbolism, theatricality, and all of it not just at a superficial level, but speaking very profound spiritual truths. So in some ways, the beauty and depth and richness of the Catholic imagination is very much on display. It's hard to communicate the sheer excitement that's going on at this spot.
And Brian, we should note, of course, that the new Pope is immediately asked what name he would like. And that gets back to that whole question. Is this something you thought about in advance, or are you thinking about as the ballots are being cast and you suddenly find yourself a serious contender? Here comes the crowd now. They've sensed some movement.
Yeah, what are they? We're coming up, Lester, on exactly an hour since we saw the smoke, and now I think they're reacting to the interior lights that have just been turned on. We will stay on this shot because that's some indication we'll get our first movement here. We are exactly at the 1 hour mark since the first appearance of white smoke. We're joined by Cardinal Egan here in our studio. Cardinal, in these last few moments, we should remember the Catholic Church has the capacity to surprise with this announcement.
It sure does. But you mentioned you saw the lights going on. That happens when all the cardinals come into that room together. And that room is really a very large room over the porch. And when those lights go on, that means that the cardinals have, or are at least, marching in right now.
And someone just peeked through the curtain. We will zoom in as best we can. Again, thin curtain, double doors. You see all the movement. You see the cardinals entering that chamber behind. And it is inextricably a part of this, that this is the last element of surprise in a world where so much